I want you to just imagine for a second that you are standing right in the middle of a muddy pit.
Oh, sounds fun.
Right. The mud is just thick, it's everywhere, and your feet are completely covered in it. So imagine you're desperately trying to wash your feet clean, but the only thing you actually have to wash them with is the mud itself.
Well, yeah, you're just scrubbing mud with mud at that point.
Exactly. You're really just moving the mess around. And according to this absolutely fascinating piece of writing we're doing a deep dive on today, that exact futility is how humans approach almost, well, every major crisis we face.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought.
It really is. The text is an essay from May 2023 by an author named Su Feng, and it was edited by Kinyu. The title alone kind of hits you over the head. It's called Cognition Within the Same Dimension Cannot Resolve Internal Conflicts.
Which is, I mean, it's a deeply uncomfortable realization for a lot of us. We're so culturally conditioned to believe that if we just, apply enough effort or enough intellect, we can just engineer our way out of any localized crisis.
We just have to think harder.
Right. Think harder, work harder. But this text completely strips that illusion away. It says we are using the exact same broken thinking to fix the problems that our broken thinking created in the first place.
So we should probably define what a dimension actually means in the context of this argument, because the author isn't talking about, like, sci-fi alternate realities here.
No, not at all.
Think of a dimension here as more like your operating system. It's the rigid set of rules, the biases, historical data, cultural norms that your brain or even an entire society uses to process the world.
Yeah, it is basically the invisible boundary of your perspective. And the core thesis of the essay is that you cannot clean something using the very substance that made it dirty in the first place.
Scrubbing mud with mud.
Exactly. A system just cannot heal itself using the same internal logic that generated its disease.
And the author drives this home using some incredibly striking analogies. Like, they don't just stick to the high-level abstract stuff. They go right for the personal.
They really do.
Like, they bring up marriage. The text explicitly asks whether those who deeply love marriage and family can actually solve the series of conflicts and crises that naturally occur within those institutions.
And the author's answer is a flat, uncompromising impossible.
Which is wild. I mean, impossible.
I know, it is a really tough concept for most people to swallow. Because our instinct is to assume that, well, proximity and passion are the keys to resolution.
Right. Like, if I love my family enough, I can fix the family problems.
Exactly. If you care deeply enough about the institution of family, you should be the best equipped to fix its internal crises. But the text argues the exact inverse of that.
How so?
Well, your very immersion in that dimension, like your deep emotional, legal, and cognitive attachment to the concept of marriage, it literally blinds you to the structural solutions it might actually need. You are too close to the canvas to see the brushstrokes, let alone, envision a completely different style of painting.
Right, because you are operating entirely within the rules of the institution, so you literally can't question the fundamental flaws of the institution itself.
Precisely.
And then the text pushes this logic further out, like into the animal kingdom. It points out that a mouse cannot solve the crisis of being caught by a cat using its own level of cognition.
Yeah, because a mouse is operating purely in the dimension of prey.
Right. It can run, it can hide, it can, develop faster reflexes, but it cannot conceptually redesign the ecosystem to just neutralize the existence of the cat.
The mouse's entire cognitive framework is dictated by the threat of the cat. Any solution the mouse invents is still fundamentally reactive to the cat's dimension.
It's still playing the cat's game.
Exactly. To actually solve the problem, the mouse would need to access a dimension of, say, biological engineering or environmental control that simply does not exist within its operating system.
Which brings up the wildest analogy in the essay, and the one I really have to challenge here. The author states it's as futile as a fish trying to fly to a forest to settle down and sing.
Yes, the flying fish in the forest.
Wait, like a fish flying into a forest, that's not just a structural boundary, that is biologically impossible. Is the author implying that humans trying to solve their own problems violates the actual laws of physics?
Well, yes and no. They are drawing a direct parallel between physical limitations and cognitive ones.
Okay.
So the medium the fish swims in the water is analogous to the social, cultural, or ideological medium a human operates in. Just as water physically restricts the fish from surviving in the forest, our specific social and psychological paradigms literally restrict our thinking.
So the author is treating human cognitive frameworks with the exact same absolute rigidity as biological habitats. Like, you can't just wish your way out of the water.
You really can't. And look at how the text applies this to broad social groups, too. It states that farmers cannot solve their own contradictions and crises. Workers cannot. Intellectuals cannot.
It scales all the way up.
All the way up the social ladder. A nation, a political party, a religion, none of them can permanently resolve their own internal friction. If you look at the mechanics of it, an intellectual approaches a problem purely through the lens of intellectualism. They will attempt to theorize, to debate, and publish their way out of a crisis, which is the exact same dimension of behavior that likely birthed their specific contradiction in the first place.
They're acting as the lock and the key at the exact same time. Like a political party trying to fix the flaws of its own extreme partisanship by just relying on its most partisan members. It's just scrubbing mud with mud again.
Right. So if our dimensions are closed loops, then every solution we try to force from the inside isn't just failing, it's actually making things much worse.
Making things worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The author quantifies this mechanism by looking at the fundamental limitations of humanity, specifically, our relationship with time and space.
Meaning our lack of omniscience.
Right.
Like we're
Yeah.
biologically stuck in the here and now, which means our vision is essentially a spotlight, not the sun. We can only really illuminate one tiny fragment of reality at any given time.
And because we lack that universal perspective, our fixes are dangerously short-sighted. When we shine our cognitive spotlight on a single, isolated contradiction just to resolve it, we lose sight of the surrounding environment.
The rest of the room just goes dark.
Completely dark.
This is where the essay introduces a terrifying multiplier. The
But-
text actually argues that when humanity resolves one contradiction, it sows the seeds of 8 new contradictions.
8.
Solving one crisis gives rise to 8 more crises. I mean, that math is brutal.
The number 8 here is a profound illustration of exponential complication in complex systems. Because we exist inside the dimension of a problem, we really only ever see the localized symptoms. We don't have the vantage point to see the root cause.
It's like patching a leak in a pressurized pipe by just sealing that one specific hole. Like, you fix the one drop, but the underlying pressure in the system hasn't changed at all.
Right, the pressure has to go somewhere.
Exactly. You've just rerouted that pressure to 8 new, weaker joints in the plumbing that are now all going to burst tomorrow.
And we celebrate fixing the one isolated crisis, entirely oblivious to the 8 new crises gestating in the dark as a direct result of our so-called solution.
Yeah.
We suppress a symptom in one sector of the economy or one region of the globe, and the underlying disease simply metastasizes in multiple new directions.
And applying that to a massive scale, the author makes a very specific point about patriotism.
They do.
The text explicitly states that a patriot cannot build a world of great harmony. And I really want to be clear to the listener here, the author is totally impartial to the politics of this.
Very much so. It's not a political critique.
Right. It's purely an analysis of the boundary line. The dimension of the nation is a closed loop. It focuses on the part at the expense of the whole, so it can never engineer a solution for the whole.
Mechanically speaking, yes. A patriot's cognition is anchored to the dimension of their specific nation. Their spotlight is permanently fixed on the benefit, preservation, and advancement of that single entity.
Right, that's the spotlight.
Therefore, by definition, they lack the cognitive bandwidth to perceive or construct a system of great harmony that would require balancing the needs of the entire globe equitably.
So it's really just basic entropy. Like, if the system stays closed, the internal friction just burns up all the usable energy until the whole thing flatlines into rigidity.
Exactly. The text states that internal contention results in an increase in entropy, which leads directly to death. If a system only feeds on itself, it starves.
So to fight entropy, you obviously need new energy from the outside. You have to open a window.
You have to.
And the author provides some very grounded, real-world examples of how this works economically. They point out how people from developed areas can easily spot business opportunities and make money in less developed regions.
Because the locals in the underdeveloped region are completely bogged down by their local mud. They are accustomed to their specific constraints. The outsiders bring completely different economic, technological, or experiential dimension with them.
They see it with fresh eyes.
Right. The text notes that these outsiders can easily discover the deficiencies and shortcomings of a local area, specifically because they are not hypnotized by its internal logic.
The crises of an impoverished nation literally need people from developed civilizations to resolve them. Because the local dimension is high in entropy, It's totally tapped out. It actually requires the lower entropy perspective of an outside dimension to reorganize its resources.
But then, and this is where it gets really interesting, the author takes this concept of the outsider and scales it up to a level that forces the reader to confront the ultimate limitation of our species.
Oh boy, yeah, here we go.
The text makes the bold claim that humanity as a whole requires, and I quote, extraterrestrial beings to solve its contradictions.
Okay, that part literally made me stop reading entirely for a minute. I was like, wait, are we literally supposed to just sit around waiting for UFOs to land and sort out inflation?
It is quite the leap.
It feels like an incredibly jarring escalation, right? From talking about local business opportunities to suddenly banking on aliens.
It does feel jarring, but if you look past the sci-fi imagery, the extraterrestrial really represents the ultimate outside dimension.
Okay.
Think about it. If the entire planet Earth is just one massive interconnected closed dimension, then human cognition, which is bound by our shared planetary time and space, cannot solve planetary conflicts. We're all essentially swimming in the exact same fishbowl.
Huh. So the extraterrestrial represents a cognitive framework that has zero historical, emotional, or evolutionary attachment to our human contradictions.
Exactly.
They wouldn't have the spotlight problem we have. They'd be looking at our world from an entirely different angle, unburdened by our specific brand of mud.
And this raises an urgent warning issued by the text. If we know we mathematically require these outside dimensions to survive, whether it's, say, an outside consultant for a failing business, a different culture for a stagnant nation, or metaphorical extraterrestrials for a dying planet, what stops us from accepting them?
Right. The text points the finger directly at our own heavily defended borders. It argues that regionalism, nationalism, and patriotism actively hinder the resolution of crises.
Because those ideologies are designed to reject the outside dimension. The more pronounced they are, the more heavily defended the walls of your dimension become.
You're locking windows.
You become so hyper-focused on protecting the purity of your internal system that you lock out the very external perspectives mathematically required to save you from entropy. You choose the comfort of the familiar mud over the shock of the clean water.
That is such a staggering macro-level concept, just the fate of nations and planets hinging on their willingness to accept outside interference. But if these macro systems, nations, and ideologies flatline when they close themselves off, it stands to reason the exact same physics apply to the micro, right?
Absolutely.
To the individual mind. And the text brings this entire massive philosophy crashing right down onto the personal level.
It shifts so seamlessly from the sociology of nations to the psychology of the individual. The text argues that the human ego itself is the ultimate closed dimension.
The ultimate closed loop.
Yes. It states quite clearly that an individual cannot truly know and understand themselves.
Which, that flies in the face of almost everything modern self-help teaches us. We are constantly told to look within for answers, to trust our gut, to do our shadow work.
Constant introspection.
Yeah. But the author applies the exact same structural logic here as they did to the political party or the marriage. Your ego is a closed system.
Yeah.
You cannot use the cognition that generated your anxiety to cure your anxiety.
It's like having spinach in your teeth.
Oh, that's the worst.
It is. You could be sitting there feeling completely confident, entirely unaware that there's a massive piece of green leaf stuck in your smile. You can't see it because you are trapped inside your own head.
Right.
But literally everyone else in the room can see it perfectly.
Yeah, the text explicitly says those around you are actually more aware of your situation than you are, which is, frankly, a terrifying thought for anyone with a healthy ego.
The author actually warns that the stronger a person's ego, the better they feel about themselves, and the more they refuse others' advice, the greater the hidden crisis on their life path.
Because they're sealing the dimension shut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When the ego rejects advice, it's actually an act of self-preservation for that specific cognitive loop. The ego is just trying to prevent the discomfort of new information. But by stubbornly insisting on its own course of action, the ego is accelerating the individual's personal entropy.
Oh, wow.
Crises and dangers aren't just possible at that point. They are mathematically guaranteed to be waiting for them.
But the author's proposed solution for the individual is incredibly radical. The text states that when we are troubled, suffering, and worried, the absolute best approach is to, and this is a quote, abandon our own cognition.
That's the core advice.
I have to be honest, that sounds dangerous. Isn't abandoning our cognition just a recipe for being easily manipulated? How do you even function if you completely stop trusting your own mind?
Well, it's about pragmatic troubleshooting, not blind submission. If your current operating system, Your deeply held way of analyzing the world has consistently led you to a state of suffering, worry, and trouble. Why would you fiercely defend it?
I guess because my ego tells me I'm right and everyone else just doesn't understand the nuance of my particular struggle.
And if you cling to that ego, you fall right back as a victim to the 1 to 8 multiplier effect we discussed earlier.
Oh, right. The 8 new
If you
problems.
try to think your way out of anxiety using your deeply anxious cognitive framework, you might temporarily soothe one worry. But the underlying pressure of that closed system will inevitably create 8 new anxieties.
It just breeds more.
The text states clearly, your troubles, suffering, and anxieties will not decrease, but instead increase.
So abandoning cognition really means hitting pause on your own ego long enough to essentially download a patch from the outside. You have to admit that you are the muddy pit and you physically need someone else to hand you the hose.
Exactly. You must seek external methods. You must actively absorb others' advice to break the entropy of your own localized mind. The danger isn't in listening to others. The real danger, according to the mechanics of this text, is the hidden crisis that awaits the person who truly believes their internal logic is flawless.
Man, we have covered massive ground here today.
We really had.
We started with the sheer impossibility of washing mud with mud and a fish trying to survive in a forest. We zoomed out to look at that terrifying 1 to 8 multiplier of human problem solving, where our short-sighted fixes just reroute the pressure of our crises.
The endless loop.
Right. And then we explored how human society faces literal entropy unless it opens its windows to entirely new, even extraterrestrial dimensions of thought. And finally, bringing it all the way back down to the mirror, realizing that our own egos, our own stubborn minds, are actually the most dangerous closed dimensions of all.
The physical necessity of an outside perspective really does apply universally. It isn't just a networking trick. It is a biological and structural requirement to prevent cognitive flatlining.
So, to you listening, the next time you are stuck on a problem, whether it's a conflict at work, a rough patch in a relationship, or just a deep personal rut, remember this deep dive. The solution is never going to be found by just thinking harder in the exact same way.
It's not.
It's not going to be found by scrubbing the mud with more mud. You have to step outside your dimension.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, kind of building on everything we've just unpacked here. If it is true that we are entirely shaped by our current dimension, and if we accept that we mathematically require completely alien extraterrestrial perspectives just to survive our own entropy, how do we actually train our minds so our egos don't automatically attack and reject those outside truths the very second they challenge us?